Hello everyone. Today we're going to sculpt an animal nose, and I wanted to talk a little bit about your research and how you can kind of take the images that you've been researching and how to turn that into an actual sculpt. So I'm going to do a mouse nose. It's very tiny compared to a human's face. So, I mean, obviously it's tiny, but I want to try to put this onto a human's face. And how do you work with the proportion? Also, I have kind of a 3/4 face angle and then also a side view. You want to make sure that you're looking at all different views when you're sculpting so that you can make sure it's going to look good once you actually have the piece. So I'm going to take my clay. I have monster clay and I've heated it up. It's slightly warm. And I'm going to start by filling in the spaces around the nose that would kind of make up the mouth and the cheek of the mouse. It'll take a while to get to the point where you want to start sculpting the nose. But first you're just going to want to build up the clay in a way where it will begin to resemble an animal face structure. And I want this piece to kind of go up along the nose itself, and you want to make sure you're avoiding the eyes. Obviously, you don't want the prosthetic piece to come up above the eye. You could have it come up along the bridge and the forehead, but you don't want it to go onto the eye. So I'm going to make sure I have a thin layer everywhere. I also want to make sure I keep the nostrils from being filled in. Ooh, let's put that back on. Okay. I want the nostrils filled in because I want to make sure there's little holes so that you can breathe once you have this prosthetic on your face. Okay, so I'm just slowly taking pieces and layering them. And I think I want this to come down to the lip. So I want this to kind of give the impression that you have a mouse kind of muzzle. And I also want to make sure that each side is symmetrical. They don't have to be perfectly symmetrical, but you want it to be somewhat symmetrical. Okay, so now to fill in between. And I also want to kind of come down this way. And I can always scoop out some of the spaces that are getting covered, like where the nostrils are. Okay, so you can see it's starting to take some shape, and as I go through and refine it, I can really help to make the sculpt look a little bit more like an animal. Right now I'm just trying to build up the clay so that it's giving the right structure. And what I want to do is focus on this area, right? We don't want to go too far down or over the mouth. We're going to avoid the forehead this time. And I want this to, like I said, feel like a rat, or a mouse, I should say, not a rat. So I'm going to really try to make this more narrow and pointed. Okay, so I spent a little more time adding some clay that will help connect the nose to the face. So there's a little bit of better transition going on now. Also, I could show you kind of what it looks like from the side. I mean, I don't know if you can see that very well, but I'm trying to get the profile. Okay, and I kept the nose holes, the nostrils here, and they'll get smaller as I go. I just wanted there to be a way to be able to make a channel to make sure that you could breathe, whoever's wearing this, and that might have to be cut out afterwards, but I want to at least try to make it pretty thin wherever the actual nose is going to be attached. So what I'm going to do now is I'm still going to build up, I'm going to keep building up around the nostril to get the little tiny nose here. And then I'm also going to start refining this. Okay, so I'm pretty close to the overall shape that I want. You can see I've gotten the nose hole a little thinner. It's not going to end up where the actual mouse nose is, so I want to find a way to kind of disguise it in the sculpt. We'll see how that continues. Like maybe I'll just cut a little slit into it, into the prosthetic, once I actually make it. But this part is going to be the actual mouse nose, and I'm following the picture over here. And it kind of has this kind of tapered shape that goes kind of like a triangle up at the top. So I want to make sure I get that. And I also want to make sure I get kind of this divot in the underneath shape. So what I'm doing with, I'm taking a chopstick because I don't have any sculpting tools. But I'm taking this to kind of block out where I want that shape to be. Maybe it's a little asymmetrical, but you can always kind of move it around as you're working. At this point, you don't have to worry about it being perfect because you'll eventually get to the point where you're going to give it a final texture. Right now, I'm just working with the clay. And then you can see that there's little mouse nostrils right on the side. That kind of go up, and then I'll do another one over here. So that gives me an idea where they're supposed to be. Okay. Can kind of mush it as I go. And then to refine the overall shape, because right now it's pretty blocky and rough on the edges. Like I said, I don't have my sculpting tools, so I'm using forks and knives and spoons. So I'm going to take this spoon to kind of burnish the surface, and that's trying to get all those little lumps and bumps a little smoother. And what you can do is, you can see I've got little streaky lines basically that are forming, which is okay. It kind of has to get ugly before it gets better. So I'm going to keep doing this on the surface until I even out the overall shape. And what you can do once you get a little farther along, you can either take your finger and just start smoothing it, but if the clay feels a little cold, what you can do is take a blow dryer and heat up the clay a little bit. I know this is probably going to be a little loud, but just to give you the idea. And that was enough to make it soft again. And then I can just smooth it along with my finger. I gave you guys some tools, some wooden tools and a little metal tool that has almost like looks like a guitar string, like it looks like a wire that's coiled. That coiled wire is a rake, and you can drag that across the surface, and that will help to smooth things out. And then you can go back in with your finger and do it again, smooth it out. So hopefully you can see that I've smoothed out the surface of the nose here. I've just basically been using my fingers to kind of smooth it out until it's fairly, I don't know, uniform all the way around. And then I've also gone in and started trying to bring in some detail with the nose, the little nose. And it's always hard to get it symmetrical, so, you know, I keep working back and forth and try to get it a little more symmetrical. You kind of have to look at it from different angles. Sometimes if you can flip your piece upside down and look at it upside down, you can get a sense of where it might be off. Like here, it looks like a little shallow versus this side's a little more full. So I probably want to put a little more here. And then I can also see that this side droops a little lower than this side. So that's kind of how, it's a little trick you can do to flip it upside down just so that your eye can see it differently. The next step I'm going to start adding texture to the surface, and you can use a piece of plastic wrap to give it a little more, it won't get as like grainy if you use plastic wrap over. You can add the texture without pulling up any clay. Okay, so I wanted to remind you guys that around the edges here on the face, you really need to make sure it's super thin because you want the prosthetic to go really smoothly from this piece to your face. So if you remember maybe when we were doing injury makeup, some of those injuries didn't have the best edges perhaps, or maybe they were built up too high. You want to make sure that this nose feels like it flows right into the face, into the rest of the face. So by taking this spoon, I can burnish the edge right onto the stone here, and that's going to give it a really thin edge. And you want to do that all the way around. And then, to smooth that out, you can take the blow dryer again and kind of heat it up. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and smooth that out. And, yeah. Okay, so you could potentially heat up the surface a little more too if you want to start adding texture. I think I'm gonna try to do it without heating it up. But I got my piece of plastic wrap, and I want to think about kind of the hair of the little mouse and what direction it might be going in. And I want to do lots of little strokes that maybe look irregular and aren't exactly going in the same direction. Like they should be going in the same grow pattern, but I want them to all be a little irregular. So let's see if you can see any of that. So got a little texture here. And if I were just to take the fork and do that, that's where it would get the little chunks, and you don't really want the chunks. So that's where the plastic wrap comes in. It's much easier to clean up and continue giving your prosthetic texture without having to keep going in and smoothing out the little crumbly pieces. Okay, so I got a lot more. And you want to do a fair amount of texture. The sculpt, like once you actually cast it in gelatin or whatever material, it always feels like the texture that you put into the sculpt goes away. And so try to think about it as doing more than you think. A little deeper, perhaps, and maybe more variation in texture. And if I don't like something, I can just smooth it out again. But you might as well try to see how it works. Experiment. And then also this mouse has lots of little spots for where the whiskers come out, and they do go in a pattern. So, I could think about where those go. The useful tool, the fork. And they kind of go in a sprayed out direction from the nose. Okay, so that's how I'm going to add texture. I'm going to go in and maybe, I gave you guys texture pads that you can use, and what you're going to do is just push that onto the surface to maybe give it a little bumpy, scratchy texture. Experiment with tools and see what you can come up with. Maybe there's a tool that I didn't give you or that I hadn't thought of. But see what's out there, see what you could try to find. See what's in your house. Also, like this nose surface, the little part, that's more of the skin. I want to do a very subtle texture, maybe like a little bit of tiny little bumps, where this I want to be more rough, like hair. So I want to find something that'll give the texture, or I could even just do this, right, and do little tiny. Maybe that's not quite what I want, but you can see that there's a little texture in that now. Maybe you can see it, I don't know, but I could try to show you. Okay, so that's the profile. I'm happy with that. I feel like it could look like a little rat human character. I'm gonna just go in and keep refining and make sure there's no weird spots that maybe have a mistake that you've accidentally hit. And you just want to layer that texture in there. Find ways to kind of smooth it out. See, this toothpick chopstick is really good at it. You can kind of go in and refine that nostril. And, you know, I gave you wooden tools. Those are really useful. You just want to keep cleaning the clay off of the tool as you work. Otherwise, you're just putting the little chunky pieces back onto the surface. And really, your fingers are a very good tool. So that's basically it. That's the how to work on your sculpt. I know this isn't finished, but that's the basics that you guys are going to need.